Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Dementia Chats. Today is July 26th, and we have so many topics. We had a hard time even weeding them down, and we've got a list for next time as well. This is going to be, I think, a fun and really informational session for you. For those of you that are new, Dementia Chats was basically created to give voice to those living with the disease. My name is Lori LeBlanc. My mom had dementia for 30 years, and I personally just thought that it was silly that we weren't asking directly people living with the disease, what is it like? What are your thoughts? How can we help you better? And so this platform was designed to again, help raise voice so that we can share information with all of you. And the session will be recorded. Please feel free to go ahead and pass this link along once I post it, which typically is in a couple of days here. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. So Kate, if you don't mind starting, that would be great.
Hello, I'm Kate, and I don't know how much to tell you, but I was my mother's caregiver. She had Lewy body dementia, she had Alzheimer's, and she had Parkinsonism. All of that diagnosed at the University of Minnesota. I have MCI diagnosed, and I think my doctor is being a little hesitant to diagnose the next step. I feel that I'm moving that way rather rapidly, and I don't care. I'm going to enjoy it. So that's me.
Okay, great. Paulan, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Paulan Gordon. I live in Ohio. I was diagnosed with vascular dementia at age 57. That was 4 years ago. And I'm involved in just about every advocacy opportunity that I can find.
Great. True, do you want to give people a little background on yourself?
I had two grandmothers with dementia, and my current diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment. I have mild to moderate cerebrovascular disease and Lewy body symptoms, and I'm very active in advocacy with dementia mentors, blogging, DAA for the USA, etc.
Okay, wonderful. Brian?
I'm Brian LeBlanc from beautiful Pensacola, Florida. I'm fourth generation with Alzheimer's. I was diagnosed in October of 2014 with early onset Alzheimer's. I'm a national public speaker and an Alzheimer's advocate.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
My name is Mike Ellenbogen. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at age 49 after struggling for 10 years. I now spend my time advocating.
Okay, great. So today we're going to discuss, one is the changing process of decision making as the disease progresses. And we also really want to talk about driving and giving up the car. When do you know when to do that, which they kind of overlap with that. So that's what we're going to start out with, and we'll see if we get to our other topics at all or not. So I'm going to start with Michael on this one in terms of your decision-making process, and what have you been noticing with that?
Well, I have to tell you, I used to be the one who made all the decisions in I guess, our family, and I'm finding it very difficult to make almost any decision anymore that's important. I mean, we were just at the financial planner yesterday, and I found myself just nodding, and I'm looking to my wife to be making the decisions. And it's like, I feel like this big because I'm incapable of supporting her and really helping her to make the decision. And it's like I'm just because I can't recall it. I can't remember all the things that people tell me to be able to make that right decision. And it's really frustrating, to be honest with you, especially when you're dealing with big ticket items and things like that, that you can't make a simple decision that at one point in time I would have made it just like that and never had a second thought. I mean, we're actually looking at a boat right now. I can't make a decision. And she's like looking at me like, well, I don't want to make the decision because you're going to yell at me if we buy this thing and it's not the right thing. Well, hey, you can't be looking at me because I'm clueless anymore. And it's really frustrating because she still thinks I should be able to make that decision. And I really can't. And I'm not sure what to do anymore. And it is so frustrating to know that something that I consider fairly simple, that I can't come up with a simple answer. And I don't know. I don't know how this is going to end. Well, I know how it's going to end, I guess. It's going to get worse. But it's terrible that, somebody here mentioned earlier, just going to the restaurant. I mean, that's the same thing. It's like I look at that menu. There's so many damn choices on that menu. It's like I'm focusing on 3 items. I say, okay, I'll just take that. And I just do that because it's easier to just grab something rather than really go through the entire list trying to figure out what's what, because I'll be there all day trying to do it. It's really frustrating. I have to tell you that's one of the things I think is probably one of the biggest pain in the you-know-what when it comes to this disease. I wish we had an easier way to figure out how to do those kind of things. You almost need one of those, I forgot what they were called, but you shake them and it picks a choice for you. I forgot what those things were. I almost need something like that for Alzheimer's,
The magic 8-ball, Michael.
True, go ahead.
I think one of the big problems in decision making is that I can't remember what I just read or heard in order to remember what my choices are. So it becomes an exercise in futility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Linda just made a comment. She said Lee never orders from the menu any longer either, and she gives him 2 choices and he decides from there. But I know even for my mom, that became difficult. And then pretty soon I would just pick a couple of different things and we would share with that. Michael, I wanted to ask you, with your wife looking at you to make those decisions, and she lives with you, she knows the disease, she knows the symptoms. How does that, I know you said it's frustrating, but how does that make you feel? I know you said you were, it's upsetting and things, but how does that, are there other feelings that come into play?
Well, I think part of the problem is she's so used to me making the decisions in the past. And I mean, like I said, right now we're looking at a boat, which is a very expensive proposition here. And she just doesn't want me to end up blaming her because she makes the decision. And I think that's the problem. But the problem is I'm no longer really capable of thinking of all the what's good, what's bad. And like somebody else just said a few minutes ago, it's like, there's a lot of things that one needs to think about and remember and to know all the good, the bad. I can't process any of that information. Mm-hmm. And in order to make that decision, you need to be able to do that. And she's still capable, or at least I hope she is. So, I mean, the person who I consider has the brains should be able to really make the proper decision. And it is frustrating for me at her because I want her to make the decision. And she wants me to make the decision, but we're really not equal in the sense of being able to make the decision. And she doesn't seem to get that. She seems to still think that I should still have some thought process and be able to do that. But I can't even tell you if I'm going to be happy next week if I buy the damn boat. I'm afraid I might not even enjoy the boat a week after I buy it. And, to spend that kind of money and then all of a sudden not be happy with it, that would be a pretty serious error.
Yeah, well, and I think, in this decision with the boat, a lot of people run into it with finances, where one has handled the finances and then all of a sudden that person gets dementia. And someone who's never had to deal with that, you know, it's kind of like when you're sitting in the passenger side, a lot of people don't pay attention where they're going. They just know the other person's going to get them where they're going to go. And they're comfortable with that. And it's just that, it's that long-term habit. And when we get stressed, I think we go back to, you know, our comfort spot of, you know, we're in this together and stuff. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, I suspect, and there I'm going to make a couple suggestions, Michael. There are a lot of women my age, in their 60s and older, who are not used to dealing with, I don't want to say the important things, but the business of the family, the banking and the business end, and the decision making on large purchases. And I wonder if maybe you've talked with her about this, right?
I don't know. I don't know if I've really talked to her about it. I guess I'm assuming she knows I have all the difficulties. I mean, she knows I struggle with all these things. But, I mean, for example, we're at the financing guy, and I'm kind of telling her, well, you kind of should go this way, but she doesn't want to do that. I'm not sure if it's the right way to go, because we already have a finance guy that I'm totally unhappy with. We've had it for 2 years, and he's screwed us so far. So I want to go somewhere else. And keep in mind, I used to do all that. So now we got to pay some idiot to do what I used to do. And the problem is the guy who's doing it isn't doing right. And I'm trying to get her to say, okay, it's time to move on to somebody else. But she doesn't want to do that. And I don't know if that's the right thing or the wrong thing.
Well, Michael, do you think she's at all capable of doing these things? If you went through your books or your financial practices, do you think she's capable of it?
Well, I have to tell you, I hate to say this. I used to think my wife was the smartest person. But now that I'm relying on her to do the things that I used to do, I'm starting to think a little differently. And I'll leave it at that.
If I had a red flag right now, I'd be waving that very, very hard right now. It's like,
no, I've seen this a lot of times, especially with my mother's generation, but I'm seeing it now with people my own age too. Of women who have never learned to handle what their husbands have been handling, and their husbands reach a point, Michael, you're gonna get worse, and someday you're gonna die, and your wife may outlive you. And here's the thing: when you're gone, she's gonna have to handle these things. And a lot of women who have never handled those things, they're terrified. They go into something like shock about household finances and what do I do now? And they do end up hiring one of those expensive finance guys who then charge her through the nose. If you could, while you're still able to, start showing her some of these things and walking her through the basics at least, maybe she would be willing to start making more decisions. Do a decision matrix over that boat with her.
Or another option might be, do you have a good family friend that's a boater? I mean, you need somebody who's a boater, you know, that would get that, what's a good boat and what's not a good boat type thing, that you both trust, but isn't going to charge you for their opinion, you know. It's a tough place to be, and a lot of times you don't want friends to know your finances and stuff too, and I get that, you know, there's a lot of privacy. That's just a thought. True, you had a comment?
One of the tools that I have somewhat always, but especially now, are absolutely necessary for me for decisions is putting it in more than one form, having it written, audio, you know, preferably even some kind of a graphic to go with being able to see things at the same time as I'm hearing about them, maybe a graph even with, you know, it seems like there was something from school with decision-making graphs, you know, where you put the positives and the negatives, just like a balance sheet. But having those things on paper, in addition to coming in the ear gate, the more channels you've got information coming in, the better chance you have of remembering what the options are and what the pros and cons are. So having multiple anyway, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paulan.
I think when we talk about the difficulty with decision making, it goes back to judgment. And these are things that we lose when we have dementia, is we start, some of these skills we start losing is our judgment. And when we start thinking about things like driving, that makes a lot of decisions. You have to make tons of decisions when you're driving constantly where you're not even thinking about it. You just have to do it. I know the one time I was driving with my uncle, and he's from out of town, and we were driving, and he said, "Oh, are you allowed to turn left on red in Ohio?" Because that's what I had done. And of course, you know, that's just not a good decision. But I just finally got rid of my car yesterday. I sold my car, and it was a really hard decision because you give up a lot of freedom. And with any of these things, when you give up any piece of your decision making, you're giving up part of your freedom of choice. And I think it's very difficult. One of the things that I have trouble with lately, or my husband has trouble with lately, is I keep getting these packages at the door. I keep buying these little things here and there, and I'm buying things. And they're not big, expensive things, so it's not a big problem. But it could be a big problem if I keep doing this. So I think you have to really take note of the fact that our judgment skills are no longer that great, and we do need help in making these decisions.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw in a comment here, and then I'll get to True and then to Brian. Linda had just made a comment in the chat box. She said that Lee used to love to camp, and that they used to have kind of a pop-up camper, but he could no longer figure out how to do that. And so she decided to get a smaller motor home that, you know, she didn't have to fart with all that stuff either, because she's never really been a camper, and he could still enjoy the process. And she said, you know, maybe that's the same with the boat process, or maybe going back to True's list about, you know, the pros and the cons. Maybe you sit down over a period of even a couple of weeks, if you don't have to make the decision right away, and revisit that list, because a lot of times something might come to you now, and something might come to you, you know, days from now, just to make sure that you're both on the same page with that. And I mean, that goes for any of us, with or without dementia. But that might be a way to get you to both feel more comfortable with making a decision too. And back to Paulan with the driving, very difficult choice that you made. And I can see everybody's head, you know, shaking with that, but such an important one. I'm going to go to True, and then Brian, and then up to Kate. So True.
The tools of being able to see something with my eyes as well as hearing it with my ears helps, but like every other workaround, the nature of workarounds is that they help for a while, but they're temporary. Mm-hmm. And I am at the point that decisions for like voting I don't feel like I can process what I hear and the information and remember what I've heard from this person and what I've heard from that person and what this person's stand is on this and on that, and the things that are important to me, that I've decided it's no longer a reasonable thing for me to be voting, which was a big deal for me.
Well, that's a huge deal. Huge deal. What did your husband think when you told him that? Or have you told him that?
Yeah, he was kind of surprised because I've always done all the research on what the different stances were of the political candidates on the different issues. For both of us, I've always done research. You know, we made separate decisions on who we voted for and what we voted for on the different issues, but I did the research.
Mm-hmm.
And so to go from me doing the research to me not even voting is a big deal.
Yeah. And that kind of ties in, I think, Michael, with where you're at too. It's, you know, not feeling comfortable making that final decision in terms of a purchase. And, you know, with Paulan, with driving, you know, making that final decision, that's a huge one. So I think these are conversations that we do have to have, you know, with family and with friends, and how that impacts you, because again, you all look okay, you know, and so we fall into that trap that you are who you've always been, and you know, you have the same skill set, and so this is a really deceiving disease. It's a really deceiving disease, and it's really easy for us as care partners to just fall into that trap again and think life is normal, you know, and you get all excited if it's, no matter what it is. I mean, it looks normal, so it should be normal. And you know, normal's our comfort zone. True?
And like you say, my diagnosis is still mild cognitive impairment, but even little decisions like I got out of the restroom, we were traveling, we've been on vacation for a month, and I got out of the restroom and, okay, which table do I go up to and ask, are you my husband? Because it's to the point that not only do I not recognize my husband in the morning, but until I hear his voice, I don't recognize him in a crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really good key point there. I'm going to go to Brian and then up to Kate. Brian?
What I was going to say, well, I was going to say a lot of things, and I keep on hearing new things to say. True. Regardless about the whole voting thing, you said that you are hearing different things and can't make sense of it all. Yeah, that's everybody. So you don't have anything to worry about there. Now, when I had always been the person to pay bills, to do finances, do budgets, and so forth. Then I met Shannon, and she was the one that always did the bills and the budgets and so forth. Needless to say, from the get-go, I didn't do that anymore. So, but that, I think that prepared both of us for now. I mean, there were certain things that I did make decisions on, as far as financial and you know, purchases and so forth. But one of the first things that we did was get the power of attorney to make her the primary decision maker of all things financial and so forth. I'm still on the bank account. I can still, you know, make transactions and so forth, but she's basically the one that, you know, she's the one that still works. And so she handles the bank account. She handles those purchases and so forth. And what happens is I still think that I can, and then I try, and I wind up calling her and saying, what do we do about this? And she says, honey, that's why I tried to tell you that, you know, maybe we should, you know, just let me do that part of it, and we'll discuss things, but I'll do the actual, and because we do discuss things as far as purchases and so forth. But if we discuss them and then I'm the one that goes to purchase it, then I get confused because I don't remember what we discussed. As far as she remembers, every single thing that we ever discussed. She knows what she knows not only what she wore, but she always also knows what I wore on the very first day that we met one another. So her mind is like a steel trap. So as far as those decision-making processes, I have learned from the beginning of our relationship to kind of let that go. We still talk about things, but now it doesn't matter, because I know that I don't have to make those decisions. And it's basically kind of comforting that I don't have to be involved in that, because I have enough things to worry about as it is. So
Okay, great, thank you. Kate?
I think I've through our discussion, picked up a couple of signals. And Michael, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to strongly suggest what to do. Okay? You and your wife need to have this conversation. And you need to have it, maybe not even just with the two of you, but with your doctor. You need to discuss with her where you're at and what you're capable of right now and what you'll be capable of 6 months from now. And you need to talk with her about, I assume you've already got your power of attorney all settled and that sort of stuff. But you need to talk about the transferring of the responsibilities. You need to, and how you're going to help her assume those responsibilities while you still can. And because you're still at a point where you can sit with her and show her what you're doing, and where she can learn, and you can say, it's because you know that there are a lot of people who end up not understanding because they've let their husbands do it until the day that husband died.
That's all good advice. But I have to tell you, the person needs to be willing to want to learn. And here's the thing. She does all the finances. Don't think I do anything anymore, because she does all that. I don't do anything anymore financially, or she pays the bill. She handles it all. And she does a good job. But it's also because there's money there that she don't have to worry about. I mean, if we were living to the penny, I think she'd have problem handling paying the bills and doing all that. I used to have a system in place that took care of everything to the penny. I did it all on a computer system. If I took money from this bank account to that bank account, it all was entered on the computer, and it had to be tracked down to the penny. I tried to teach her that way, and she didn't want to have nothing to do with it. And that's okay. Everybody has their own way of doing things. And I don't, whatever works for her, works. The problem is she doesn't want to find out what works for her.
How about if you use the boat as a tool and say, in a year, I'm not going to care about a lot of things about the boat. Get me one special feature of the boat that I'm going to really love, and then get the boat that pleases you, because you're the one that's going to be using the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. I am kind of thinking that maybe one of the elements is that she is worried about the relationship between the two of you more than the rest, because it may concern her more what your attitude is going to be about her decisions, because you weren't the one making the decisions. Do you know what I'm saying?
Lori, is there such a thing as a counselor to get couples through these stages of dementia?
If it was me, I would go to the Guy and I are going to a counselor now and discussing these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a psychiatrist because of my other issues with the hallucinations and stuff. So it was already in place. So it was convenient to go through him on it. And Paulan, you were going to say something.
I just wanted to say that I think that it's very difficult for us as people with dementia to be making all of these decisions as we're talking about what we should do and we shouldn't do this and we should do this, because our judgment is faulty. It's no longer, we can't rely on our judgment and say, oh yes, I know this is true. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. And maybe that's why the driving thing is so hard, because I can say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me and I'm doing fine, but then somebody else might have a different opinion about that. And it just comes down to that with every single decision we make. It's like you just can't trust your own judgment. I really find I have to run things by my husband and say, this is what I think, this is what I think, what do you think? And we kind of do it like that. So I haven't given up all my decision-making abilities, but I do run things by him.
Well, and I think, I think it does have to be kind of this team effort, but we have to also take into consideration everybody's relationships are different. And, they have, all of you have probably been together with your spouses or significant others a long, long time, and you have your own modes. And so there isn't a right or wrong way to approach this. I mean, you really have to do what you think is best for your own relationship. And, going to, a social worker would always have advice. A psychologist will always have advice. I would say, if it was me having to pick, I would probably go to a psychologist over a social worker looking for this type of advice, just because they deal with dynamics. And they're trained in that mode. And, 99% of the time in our relationship, it's our dynamics and our skill sets meshing together or not meshing together, that hold us together or pull us apart. And so I think it's really, and to be able to have that balance so that each side is comfortable. And Michael, like you said, when you were doing the finances, you had one way to do it, and you appreciate that's not her way. She does it in a different format, and it's working. But I do think having the discussion might not hurt to do. But again, you have to feel comfortable in having that discussion up front, because this is just the beginning of other things to come. And it could be a big scale or it could be a small scale, but you can still have those same feelings of feeling that you don't know enough. You don't trust yourself enough to make those decisions. And maybe she just has to hear those words, and maybe you don't want to have that conversation because you really, that's another step of giving up, like with Paulan giving the car up. That's a whole nother step of kind of admitting and accepting and dealing with this disease in terms of where you're at. And so you have to be, I think, emotionally ready to have that conversation as well. True?
You have to be ready to have the conversation, and she has to be ready to hear it.
Yeah.
Because that's another part of it, is the other person really hearing when you say, no, please don't make me try to make this decision. And I'll say it over and over and over again. And about the 200th time, he'll start hearing it. He'll start hearing it because he doesn't want to hear it. Yeah. That means I'm going down, and he doesn't want to hear that. So he doesn't hear it. And I think that's part of being a human and loving the person that you're hearing it from. Mm-hmm. So it makes it a really hard thing.
Have you found going with a psychologist, I think just sometimes having that witness, because if and I think most families are like, everybody's kind of pigeonholed into their roles. This is who you are. This is who you've always been. And so you can tell me something, but you're not the one I'm going to take that advice from, you know, even though that might be your specialty and you may have 20 degrees behind you. I still don't value it coming from you, but I will value it coming from somebody else. And sometimes I think that that's really ironic, but I see that in families all the time. Where there's just those dynamics, and sometimes hearing it from a third party. When I sold real estate, I saw it all the time. I could say things to families that families had been saying to one another for years, but nobody heard anything. The boxing gloves were up, you know, and then I could come in and it would just like melt. And all of a sudden we were on the right road. And part of that, I think, is timing. And, you know, people are tired of the boxing gloves and going, okay, this is an outside, non-biased party who is seeing something. So I can't go back to my old ways. I can't ignore this person anymore, you know, in this situation.
Not only that, I think part of it is the change of environment. So say my husband knows that he's not the only one hearing me say that. It's another person, and it changes the way he hears it because the other person is hearing it too. It just changes, it clicks something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessary for the other person to say anything.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to deny when there's a witness. Even though everybody sees things a little different. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, true. You said it when you started your comment that they have to be ready to listen to you. You have to also be ready to listen to them. Being a caregiver is a very hard thing, and the caregiver is scared to death, exhausted, and not sure they're doing the right thing with everything that they try to do for you. I've been on that side too. And so you have to be open when they say, I'm not sure I can do that, or I'm not sure I know how to do that. I will try, but understand if I screw it up. It's got to be a two-way street. And then I just wanted to get in today because of what I'm hearing from all of you guys. I'm single. I have 3 sisters who love me dearly, but they don't live with me. And I want you all from this group and from other groups that I've been in chat groups with to know that you who have spouses, you are so very lucky. Being a caregiver with dementia is very, very hard. I was working full-time while I was my mother's caregiver. I was getting by on 2 hours of sleep a night. Would you all please give your spouses a big hug from me and tell them that there are people who know what they're going through. Okay?
Yeah, well, and that's a good point, because not everybody has somebody, you know, to pass stuff off to, and that's a really, really good point, because I think that is a under talked about thing too. Everyone thinks that there's a built-in spouse or care partner, and you know, I'm single. You know, I have great family with my daughter and her family and stuff, but it wouldn't be the same, you know, at all, you know, if it was me.
My younger sister kind of fills that role for me, but she's not with me all the time, which is why I have conversations with her even though she's not here.
Okay. Brian, any comments? Oh, can't hear you, but Saya shaking her head.
No.
Okay. Anybody else want to make any comments about decision making or struggles that they're having with decision making?
I might say that even simple things like eye test requires big problems because you can't remember what the other option was. So how are you supposed to know which one's better? It's a ridiculous thing for somebody that has problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or trying to, we'll walk into a restaurant and my husband still wants me to be making some decisions. So he says, you figure out where we're going to sit. I can't remember what the elements, what the factors would be. A, sound. B, temperature. You know, I really don't want to sit in front of a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to sit next to people who are talking very much because of my sound processing problems.
Yeah.
But I don't remember those things. And
Yeah.
it's just, please don't. But it doesn't register to him. It's a problem.
Yeah, well, and it can be lighting, it can be chair or booth, it can be, I mean, there's so many different factors with all of that stuff. And that is something I think we really need to talk to our care partners about in saying, this is the disease, this is, why they call it memory loss, and dementia is I can't retain all these things. This is executive functioning. And I need you to remember what it is that makes me comfortable, because I might remember this and I might remember that, but I might not remember them all at the same time. And then we're going to have a problem, because we're going to be getting up and moving, and so it's just, it's those simple little things. But again, if you were the one, true, and I don't know if this is true, but maybe you were always the one that picked the spot in the restaurant or where you went, or, was kind of that front face with the hostess or walking in, picking the table. They just get used to that stuff,
No, I think it's more that he feels like I'm not making decisions on other things and he wants me to feel part of things.
Okay. Well, so that's a really good thing to know. And maybe looking and just saying that's too many elements.
I did that to my mother a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Paulan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. When you start out your life together with your spouse, you have certain expectations from each other. And one of the things that in our situation, my husband used to always say, "You're the smartest woman I've ever known." That was something he said repeatedly. And over the years, now all of a sudden it's like I know I'm not losing my smartness, I'm losing my cognitive skills though. And it's like, well, how our relationship is changing now. He still is stuck in this, I should make all the decisions, I should do the books, I should do all that stuff because I'm better at it. But you realize that this whole relationship has to change, and now he has to start to take over some of these things, even just as he has to take over the driving for me. So it's a real change in relationships.
Yeah. And that's always a difficult thing. That's always a difficult thing, because it moves your comfort zone, and you both have different comfort zones, with that. One thing that I wanted to bring up, because we did talk about the driving, was the alternatives for driving. I know when we were talking offline, we were talking about, friends and family driving. We were talking about Metro Mobility. Has anybody here ever used like Uber? Because I know that that's an app you can get on your phone. It's supposed to be reasonable. I haven't used it a ton. I've used it a bit. But, you can find somebody in your own neighborhood. And then a lot of times you can, what I've found is some of these guys work offline. And so then all of a sudden you can just get a card from them, and they have kind of a private business as well. I'm not sure they're supposed to, but I know that is done. with that. And so that might be another option too, because I've heard so many people struggle with like Metro Mobility, trying to get a time that will match a doctor's appointment where it's not going to be a whole day of waiting someplace, because that's got to be confusing and frustrating in and of itself. And so I think that that's something that we really have to look at as a society, is having accessible transportation, and most cities are not set up well for that at all. And that's definitely an issue. And I think that keeps people at risk who might be thinking about giving up their license, but say, what am I going to do if I don't have it? And that's not good for anybody as well. Brian, go ahead, Paulan.
I just want to say that my husband, it was very hard for him, for me to be making this decision too, because now he has to suddenly drive me everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, he still, even after we sold the car and everything, he said, no, I'm not going to take you off my insurance on the other car. I don't want you to give up your license. I want you to have that in an emergency situation if you need to drive it. I'm thinking, well, if it's an emergency situation, I'm really going to be in bad shape,
Yeah, but again, that gets us, as care partners, going back to the old normal of, accessibility and respect and all of those types of things, not realizing crisis, extra stress, more symptoms. We don't always think logically. We go back into that comfort zone there. And so maybe it's, speaking up and just saying, did you just hear what you said? And let's step back into why that might not be a good decision for me to be driving in that case. Because I don't think we even know we're saying those things. I mean, we think we're just being really logical and savvy. And I think most care partners would sit back and go, oh my gosh, you're right. And how nice would that be to hear? You're right. And that you're heard on that too. And maybe you'd be argued with, I don't know. But I just think you guys have such valuable insight that people need to hear, your voice and your spoken word, because even Michael, when we were talking, somebody asked you, have you talked about this with your wife? And you're like, you weren't really sure. Well, I think she knows me, and so we, again, when we're in relationships, if it's friends or family or whatever, we just, a lot of times, in society in general, illness or not, we just assume the other guy knows what's going on with us. But I think with this disease, what I have seen, and please tell me if I'm wrong, or if you disagree with this, but what I have seen is you guys get really good at hiding things, especially in the beginning. And so you don't always make it obvious to us, and part of that, I think, is you're trying to meet our standards, but part of it is probably not wanting to let go either. And so it makes it tricky. Because the signs that aren't always what they are today. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm just going to jump in here and say it's not just us trying to hide things. I actually tell myself to try to avoid the Showtime thing. But in my case, my three sisters have a very convenient memory in that when they need something from me, I am physically and mentally and everything else in perfect condition, and I can do anything, but then they are very aware of things I have problems with. It's goes both ways. It's not just me pretending I'm perfect. It's them pretending I'm perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I think it all goes back to comfort zones. Michael?
I think in my case, part of the problem is she doesn't want the responsibility of saying yes, because if I end up not liking the boat, I'm going to say, well, you wanted it. And I think that's the problem. It's, you know, I mean, she's great at understanding all the particulars, the technical stuff about the boat. She understands all that because I'm relying on her to do that, and she does that very good. But I think she doesn't want me to end up blaming her later on for making the decision, say, well, you said you liked it, so that's why I got the damn boat, you know?
Maybe you videotape that you're on board.
They say that the happiest day in a person's life, in a boater's life, is when they buy their boat and then when they sell the boat.
That is 100% true. I've owned 4 boats, and I can tell you that is 100% true.
Brian, you had a comment?
Yeah, you had said something about hiding behind our or trying. I forgot what you said about trying to hide how we are. I don't care how hard we try to hide who we are. We're like, we're see-through. I mean, we think, oh, I got this. I'm hiding this real good. Nobody knows. Look, I'm hiding behind my finger here. But people know, you know, and I think it's just our way of just trying to hold on a little bit to our independence, basically. Still trying to be that person, because when I'm out giving presentations, I when I talk about it to other people, I use the term, and I may have mentioned this before, but I use the term of the puppy in the window. And you know, you're giving a presentation, and all of a sudden you come out and you say, and by the way, I have Alzheimer's. And you see the looks on people's faces, and it's almost like, oh my God, look, he's got Alzheimer's, and he's talking. He's even making sense, you know. And you become this anomaly. What I can't think. I know the word. I can't think of it. But
perfect.
Yeah, you know, you become this thing that all of a sudden it's like, but you know, they're not 80 years old. How can this person have Alzheimer's and still be functioning in society? And I think that's what we want to disguise ourselves as still being productive members of society, which I think we are for the most part through our advocacy. But we also have to understand that we aren't the people that we used to be, because we do have issues in doing everything, you know, like driving. You know, I mentioned before that if I feel if I'm not having a confident day, I'm not going to get behind the wheel of a vehicle, because I don't want to hurt somebody in my vehicle, and especially I don't want to hurt anybody in another vehicle. So I still have that wherewithal to know when I should and shouldn't get behind the wheel of a car.
But when will you know when that time changes?
Well, it has already, because more and more I'm giving up the opportunity to drive by letting my son or my daughter or my wife drive me. Only when I have to absolutely, positively have to drive is the only time that I drive, and it's only very short distances. But I still use my GPS to get from here to the grocery store, even though I know where it is. I just don't trust myself anymore to get there. But I'm losing that confidence in myself. And that's very hard to accept, because I drove everywhere. I was the driver. That's who I was. That was part of me. And now I'm the passenger. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a very good passenger. I'm having a really tough time to do that. But I'm not going to sell my truck because of the fact that my son's going to use the truck when he is fully licensed. So it still sits in the driveway. But it's a reminder. It's basically like, hey, I'm still here. Come on, take me out. But I did recently buy a bike. I have a bicycle. And I'll start using that for exercise purposes and so forth. But, Paulan, I admire you for giving up, not only giving up your vehicle, but selling it. That's huge. I know the time is going to come where I'm going to give up my license. But, and I think Shannon and I will make that decision together, because I count on her to be the realist, even though I'm still trying to hold on to certain things. But the time's coming, it's not far off, and it's going to be like I guess I could look at it, I think it's going to be like a death, because that part of me is not going to be anymore. And that's, I have a lot, and that's just one step in the grand scheme of what I'm going to face later on. I try not to look, that far down the road, because I know what it is. So I just kind of take one step at a time. So, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Linda had noted in the chat box that Lee's physician had taken his driver's license away at the age of 49. That he went into really bad depression. And again, being taken away versus of your own choice is a huge, huge difference there. She said now 5 years later, he's totally unable to drive, and she's glad that he didn't have a choice. Though it was a difficult time. I do want to mention we had a couple in our memory cafe, and her husband gave up driving probably 5 years ago. He hated it, didn't like it, but all of a sudden got up one morning and got dressed and took the car. And she was shocked. Because he didn't like to drive, he didn't want to drive, she didn't think that it was ever going to be a problem. And he was found like 8 hours later going the wrong way on a freeway out of town. And nobody got hurt, but what a scary realization with you just never know. And, she thought that they were totally safe in the house and had alarms on the door, which she woke her up the first time fully dressed, and he was going to go get his healthcare worker. And she said, well, she comes to you and it's still early, so go back to bed. So he went back to bed, and then she didn't hear him the second time when he snuck out the door with the keys to the car. So this is a bizarre disease, one that we just never quite know. Kate, real quick, because we're at the 11 mark here.
Yeah, I just want to sneak this little thing in. When we lose things like the driving privilege or each of these things, or the decision making, all of that, it's not necessarily that we're losing each of these items so much, at least to me. Each of those items represents a part of my adulthood. And it's the loss of that part of my adulthood that I see slipping away. And that's what hurts.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Michael, any last comments you have?
Unless you guys want to make the decision for me.
Well, rowboat.
Will you allow me to drive the boat?
You're welcome to come down anytime. Hey, I was thinking of driving it down to Florida.
Can I wear a hat? Okay.
Paulan, how about you? Any comments?
No, I don't think so.
Nothing? True? No last comments for you? And Brian, anything that you would like to say?
No, I think I've run my course.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for being with us today. And this has just been a really, I think, a valuable conversation. Our next Dementia Chats will be the second Tuesday of the month. So that'll be August 9th. I will get this recorded and pushed out here in the next couple of days. And we'll post this on YouTube like we usually do, and all the social media. So again, thank you everyone for participating. Appreciate it.